there's a snail waving at you. Right now, if you go back to nearly any episode of Adventure Time and really look past Finn and Jake, past the monster of the week, past the candy people going about their strange business in the background, there's a tiny snail somewhere in the frame. He's waving. He always waves. And for the first 2 seasons of the show, that's all he is. A little in-joke, a challenge from Pendleton Ward to his animation team to hide a mollusk in every episode. A small reward for anyone paying close enough attention. A secret for the people who are really watching. And then, in the season 2 finale, Mortal Folly, that same snail walks up to the Amber Prison, where the Lich has been sealed for centuries, bashes his head against it until it shatters, and releases the most powerful evil the Land of Ooo has ever known. He was possessed. He'd been waving at you the whole time, while the Lich was riding him like a sleeper agent, waiting for the right moment. Every cheerful little wave was something darker underneath. That's the thing about the Land of Ooo. Everything in it is doing at least 2 things simultaneously. The bright colours and the candy architecture and the goofy adventure plots are all real. They're genuinely fun, genuinely warm, genuinely one of the best things animation has ever done. But underneath every frame, if you're watching carefully enough, there's a layer of secrets, hidden histories, buried details, and background lore that the show almost never calls attention to. It just leaves them there. It trusts you to find them. Tonight, we're going through all of it. We're going to talk about every major secret hiding in the Land of Ooo, the background details that rewrite what you think you know about the setting, the hidden geography that tells a completely different story about the world, the secrets embedded in the characters themselves that the show lets you discover across 10 seasons without ever announcing them. The snail, the map of Ooo, and what it actually looks like from space, BMO's origin, and the ancient human who built him, and why that changes the entire history of Ooo. The languages, the religions, the cosmic owl, and what it means when you see it in a dream. Every single thing the show is hiding in plain sight. This is the kind of video that rewards the people who've been watching late at night when everyone else is asleep and you're 2 episodes deep into a rewatch and you notice something you never noticed before. If that's you, get comfortable. We're going to be here for a while. And if you haven't subscribed to Enchiridion yet, it genuinely helps us keep making these. Hit that button and come back to us for every one of these deep dives. Okay, the snail. Let's start with the snail, because he is the key to everything. Pendleton Ward created the hidden snail as a challenge to his animation team, reportedly somewhere during the show's development. A running gag designed to reward eagle-eyed viewers. The concept of a hidden recurring character isn't unique to Adventure Time. Ward and his team were aware of similar traditions in other shows, and the snail exists in that lineage. He's always hiding. He's usually small, often tucked into a corner of the background, waving with one tiny arm. The wiki confirms he appears in all but a small handful of episodes across the series, absent from the original pilot from Food Chain, which was made by a guest animator and therefore outside the normal production pipeline, from The Wand, from Obsidian and the Frog Seasons shorts. The thing is, the snail appearing in Simon and Marcy, the flashback episode set 996 years before the present day during the immediate aftermath of the Mushroom War, means that either this particular snail has an impossibly long lifespan, or there have been multiple snails across generations serving the same waving function. The wiki notes this and hedges. It might just be another snail, but it might be the same snail. And if it's the same snail, it's the oldest, continuously existing being in Ooo, waving pleasantly through 1,000 years of history, like everything is fine, while carrying an ancient cosmic evil in the back of its mind. Here's the part that genuinely gets to me every time I think about it. The Lich's possession of the snail isn't just a plot device. It recontextualizes every prior snail appearance in the series. Go back and watch the snail waving in any season 2 episode after Mortal Folly. That's not the snail, that's the Lich, using the snail as a surveillance device. That's an ancient being of pure destruction, older than the universe itself, hiding in a background gag, watching the heroes. It turns a cute Easter egg into something deeply uncomfortable. The show knows this. I genuinely believe the writers knew exactly what they were doing. The most cheerful detail in the show is also the most sinister one, and it was there from the beginning. After the Lich's defeat in the season 2 finale arc, the possessed snail continues to appear in episodes, waving as always, right up through the beginning of Season 4. The implication being that the Lich, even trapped or diminished, is still present somewhere in Ooo, watching through those little white eyes, biding his time. It's one of the most patient horror setups in children's television, buried in a background character that most viewers never even registered. I've rewatched the early snail appearances probably more times than I should admit while putting this together, and each time I find myself going, I know what this is now. And the wave hits completely differently. It's not cute anymore. It hasn't been cute since 2011. The snail has been watching. Right, so the geography. Pendleton Ward confirmed in interviews that the Land of Ooo is a continent. Adam Muto, who took over as showrunner around Season 5, has described it as being roughly the size of a smallish island nation. Both of those things can be true simultaneously. If you think of Ooo as a continent, in the sense of a major landmass, rather than in the sense of Eurasia scale enormity. And if you look at the actual official maps that Frederator Studios released, alongside the original Adventure Time pitch documents, you start to get a sense of the world as it actually exists. There are two official maps, a black and white version, drawn by the background artist known as Ghost Shrimp, and a colour version. The consensus from both the production team and the fandom is that Ghost Shrimp's black and white map is the more reliable one. Its overall shape matches the aerial view of Ooo you can actually see in the Season 1 episode Business Time, when the show gives you a brief overhead look at the land from above. A modified version of this map also appears on Princess Bubblegum's hologram display in the episode The Other Tarts. What's on these maps that the show never directly draws attention to a lot? On the black and white map to the north of Ooo is something called the Sea of Something, which contains a small island chain called the Shiny Isles, and these are apparently crystalline, covered in gems. There are unknown lands on a northern peninsula near the Ice Kingdom. There's a cloud forest in the northwest, clouds with trees growing out of them, which is exactly what it sounds like. These places have never appeared in any episode. They exist only on the map. They are part of the world the show built that you will never actually visit, which is its own kind of beautiful and slightly haunting detail. The suggestion of a world much larger than what you're allowed to see. On the colour map, there's a mystery temple off the east coast of Ooo that resembles a Mesoamerican pyramid. There are notes indicating that Marceline's cave is located at the Red Rock Cliffs on the eastern coast. And here's one that the show itself sort of hints at but never confirms directly. The map shows the shape of Ooo, and the shape of Ooo, when you really look at it, vaguely resembles an eagle or a phoenix in flight. The wiki documents this. Whether it's intentional topographic symbolism or just the organic result of drawing a landmass, I can't say for certain. But the show has a recurring motif of phoenixes and resurrection, and the world that grew back after the Mushroom War being shaped like a bird of rebirth is exactly the kind of thing the Adventure Time team would put in a background map and never mention. From space, in the few episodes where the show gives you a view of Earth, you can see that the planet has a massive chunk missing from it. This is probably the most disturbing geographical detail in the entire show. The world is incomplete. Whatever weapon or weapons were used in the Mushroom War didn't just destroy civilization, they physically damaged the planet itself, gouged a piece out of it, left a scar that's visible from orbit. The Mushroom War didn't just change history, it changed the physical structure of Earth. And the people of Ooo, born into this world 1,000 years later, have never known anything different. They don't know there's a piece missing. How could they? This is just the shape of their sky. There's a detail from the wiki that I keep coming back to here. In Jake's croak dream, the prophetic vision of his own death in the New Frontier, the Earth in the background doesn't have the missing chunk. But when the events of that dream actually play out in the real world, the Earth shown is just a model globe belonging to Banana Man. So even within the show's internal logic, the missing chunk Earth is the real one. The intact globe is a toy. The broken world is the truth. I don't know if that's intentional symbolism or a continuity detail that got cleaned up in production, but the reading is right there if you want it. Let me talk about the languages of Ooo, because this is one of those things that casual viewers completely miss, and that once you notice it is absolutely everywhere. English is the primary language, obviously, but the Land of Ooo is quietly multilingual in ways that reflect both the post-apocalyptic history of the world and the specific cultural backgrounds of the show's characters. Lady Rainicorn, Jake's girlfriend, the Rainbow Unicorn, who is one of the show's most consistently present supporting characters, speaks almost exclusively in Korean throughout the series. Jake and Princess Bubblegum can can understand her but rarely speak Korean themselves. The show never subtitles her dialogue. If you don't speak Korean, you don't know what she's saying. If you do, you get an entirely different layer of her character that English-speaking viewers never accessed. Princess Bubblegum speaks German in multiple episodes. What have you done? Frost and Fire. May I come in? Bananas. Go with me. And in the episode Bonnabelle Bubblegum, which flashes back to her earliest days after emerging from the mother gum, German is used by her family. The Adventure Time Encyclopedia, the official book published on July 22nd, 2013, written by Martin Olsen, states that German is the preferred language of demons. So there's a layer here where Bubblegum's use of German connects her in some murky cultural mythological way to the demonic dimension her friend Marceline is partly from. Whether that's intentional or incidental, I genuinely don't know, but it's there. Flame King speaks French in Incendium. Jake sings Alouette, a French song, in Holly Jolly Secrets Part 2. In The Real You, there's a French poster in the background of the Apple classroom. Jake says a Japanese phrase in Marceline's Closet. A soft person calls Jake kawaii, Japanese for cute. In Gut Grinder, the book Jake consults in Hugwolf has its title in Latin. Put it together, and what you get is a world where the linguistic aftermath of the Mushroom War has produced a patchwork of languages, some preserved from specific survivors, some absorbed into cultural practice, without the people of Ooo understanding where they came from. The candy people, who celebrate what they call a day for wearing sweaters and watching secret tapes. In Holly Jolly Secrets Part 1, because none of them remember the holiday it used to be, are doing something analogous with language. They're using words and phrases whose origins are lost. The world is full of linguistic ghosts. And then there's the picture in Marceline's house. Natasha Allegri, who created the Fiona and Kate characters as fan art before Ward put them in the show, and who was a key storyboard artist in the early seasons, confirmed on social media that the picture of a mother and child visible on the wall of Marceline's house is an image of Mary and the baby Jesus. It's a Christian icon, a piece of religious art hanging in the home of a 1,000-year-old vampire who was alive before and during the Mushroom War. The show's characters never acknowledge it. No one comments on it, but it's there. The implication, and the wiki notes this directly, is that Marceline is old enough to actually remember the religion that produced that image. She knows what it means. She was alive when Christianity was a functioning institution rather than a legend or a lost tradition. She's been carrying that image with her for 1,000 years, and the show never tells you why. It never explains whether it belonged to her mother, or whether it's a personal devotion, or whether it's just a remnant of the pre-war world she keeps because it's familiar. The show trusts you to notice it and sit with what it means. You know what's funny is that this is exactly the kind of detail that Adventure Time does over and over again. Drops something into a background that contains entire unspoken stories and then just leaves it there. The show is absolutely full of untold histories. You're not meant to know everything about Marceline's 1,000 years. You're meant to understand that they were full. Let me spend some time with the Tree Fort, because I think it deserves more attention as a location than it usually gets in discussions of the show's hidden details. The Tree Fort is Finn and Jake's home for essentially the entire run of the series. It's a massive living tree with a door in the shape of a face, that classic Adventure Time image, and inside it's this homey, ramshackle space that feels genuinely lived in a way that a lot of cartoon homes don't. And the show layers in details about it across the years that paint a very specific picture of its history. The tree that the Tree Fort is built in grows from the buried remains of Shoko, one of Finn's past lives, the thief who stole Princess Bubblegum's amulet and died regretting it. This is revealed in The Vault, Season 5, Episode 34, which aired September 23rd, 2013. Finn has been carrying this past life in his subconscious, locked in his vault, the mental compartment where he stores things he can't process, for the entire series. And when the vault finally opens, we learn that his home, the place that he's lived since before the show started, is literally grown from his own past life guilt. The tree is Shoko's body. The place where Finn has always felt safest is built on top of a wound from a life he didn't know he'd lived. And when he gives back the amulet, when Shoko can finally rest, the tree groans, and you understand that this structure has been holding something for a very long time. In Be More, Season 5, Episode 28, which aired July 22nd, 2013, there's a visible nuclear bomb on a shelf in the Tree Fort, sitting there like a piece of decor. That's right, Finn and Jake have a nuclear bomb on their shelf. The show doesn't comment on it It's not a plot point. It's just there representing the way in which the weapons of the Mushroom War have become mundane objects in Ooo, things you might pick up from the ruins and keep around without fully understanding what you're holding. The fact that they live in a house is with an atomic bomb on the shelf, and it's less remarkable to them than BMO running low on memory is one of the show's best passive arguments about the normalisation of apocalyptic history. There's also a recurring detail that fans who've done exhaustive rewatches have noted. The numbers 8, 18, 20, 12 appear hidden in several episodes of the show, specifically in the episode I Remember You. There's a piece of paper in the past room that displays this date. The wiki confirms it's the marriage date of background artist Santino Lascano, hidden as an in-joke by the production team. It's the kind of thing that exists entirely outside the show's diegetic world and is purely a mark left by the people who made it. A human fingerprint pressed into the frame. I love these details. Love them because they remind you that there were people sitting at desks, drawing backgrounds, and they were doing it with care and with personality, and sometimes with a touch of genuine mischief. The show isn't just a text to be analysed, it's an artefact of specific humans making something together, and the hidden details are how those humans left traces of themselves. Now, BMO, Be More, phonetically, BMO, is one of the most beloved characters in Adventure Time, and also one of the most lore-dense once you actually start pulling on the threads. They're introduced in the Season 1 episode, Business Time, and for the first several seasons function primarily as Finn and Jake's sentient game console / household appliance / friend. BMO is childlike, imaginative, and has this deeply sweet relationship with pretend and play. They're constantly performing, being human, acting out scenarios, creating elaborate inner worlds when Finn and Jake aren't home. The episode BMO Noir, which is done entirely in black and white as a film noir parody narrated by BMO, is one of the show's most purely delightful half hours. The layer underneath BMO that changes everything comes in Be More, Season 5, Episode 28, when BMO accidentally deletes their core system drivers, and Finn and Jake have to take them to the MO factory in the Badlands to get a reinstall. The episode was nominated for a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Short Format Animated Programme at the 66th Primetime Emmy Awards. It aired July 22nd, 2013, and what it reveals is that BMO was created by a being called Mosef Mastro Mo Giovanni at a facility called MO Company in the Badlands of Ooo over 1,000 years ago. Mo is one of the most quietly devastating characters the show ever introduced. He's ancient. The DMO in the episode states that MO Company was founded over 1,000 years ago by Mosef Mastro Giovanni. This means Mo predates the Mushroom War. He survived it, and he survived it by gradually replacing his biological body with mechanical parts. By the time Finn and Jake meet him, he's an emaciated, barely there presence, kept alive only by a network of MO robots tending to his physical needs. The wiki notes that Pendleton Ward confirmed Mo is not a human because he has been wasting away and bit by bit replaced his organs and body parts with electronics, making him a cyborg or even robot. His skin is still human, but that may be all that's left of the original Mo. Think about what that means. Mo lived through the Mushroom War. Mo survived whatever happened to Earth 1,000 years ago, and then he spent the subsequent 1,000 years running a robot factory in the Badlands, replacing himself piece by piece, creating billions of MOs to assist him and keep him functional. He created BMO specifically because he wanted to take care of a son, but he never had a family, never ended up dating any women, as the wiki dryly puts it. And so he sent BMO into the world alone to find a human child to care for, to be a companion, to find a family Mo never had. And BMO found Finn. And Finn is, in a sense, the son Mo built BMO to look after. 1,000 years of Mo's loneliness translated into one sentient game console who ended up in the tree fort with the last human in Ooo. The episode Be More was nominated for an Emmy. It lost to a Mickey Mouse short, which, no disrespect to Mickey Mouse, feels like a robbery. But there's more to Mo than even Be More reveals. In the Distant Lands Special BMO, the first of the 4 specials released on HBO Max, starting in 2020, we learn that MO Company had blueprints on Mo's desk for dome-shaped cities on Mars. In the final shot of The More You Mo, The Mo You Know, Part 2, Season 7, Episode 14 to 15, aired December 5th, 2015. If you look out the window of Mo's memory, you can see a sleeping fire giant under construction. Tumblr user GunterFan1992, whose Adventure Time episode analyses are some of the best on the internet, documented this detail. the implication being that Mo may be the original creator of the fire giants, and therefore indirectly the progenitor of the Fire Kingdom itself. That's not stated in the episode. It's in a background detail, half glimpsed through a window in a flashback memory sequence. Mo may have built the civilization of Ooo, not deliberately, not with any grand plan, but through the work of his 1,000-year existence. He created and sustained and shaped things that form the bones of the world Finn and Jake grew up in. The BMO Distant Lands episode establishes that MO Company rockets were involved in sending BMO into space at some point in the future, and that those rockets connected to the human islands. A blimp with MO Company written on it appears in the Founders Island documentary footage in Hide and Seek. Mo is everywhere in the deep structure of Ooo, and the show almost never draws attention to it. Here's a detail from B More that I've thought about way too many times. When Finn and Jake are falling through the floors of the MO factory, they pass through several different levels of the building. On the floor of the second level, if you look closely, that's where the snail appears in this episode. The Lich's vessel is falling through the same building that contains the origin of one of the show's most beloved characters, and the snail is just there, presumably waving, because the snail is always there. The snail connects everything. I'm serious. The snail is the connective tissue of Ooo. I want to talk about the cosmic owl because it's one of those background mythological elements that the show deploys sparingly, but with such specific weight that every appearance lands hard. The cosmic owl is exactly what it sounds like, an enormous owl who exists at the cosmological level of Adventure Time's universe, associated with fate and prophecy and croak dreams. A croak dream is a premonitory vision of death. When you have a croak dream, you're genuinely seeing your own future end. The cosmic owl appears within croak dreams to validate them. His presence in a dream confirms this is real, this is going to happen. He first appears as a significant presence in The New Frontier, Season 3, Episode 18, which aired February 6th, 2012, when Jake has a croak dream and becomes convinced he's going to die soon. The episode uses this premise for a mix of comedy and genuine existential weight, and it's one of the better examples of early Adventure Time, threading the needle between its funny and serious registers. But the key thing the episode establishes is that croak dreams are the show's version of genuine fate. They're not metaphors or anxieties, they're prophecies. The cosmic owl also appears in Hoots, Season 7, Episode 15, in a much more personal story about what he does when he's not delivering cosmic destiny. It turns out he has feelings. He falls for Princess Bubblegum after visiting her in a dream. He's lonely in the way that beings with vast cosmic responsibilities are often lonely in this show. The cosmic owl as a concept, this entity whose specific job is to witness the deaths of the people of Ooo before they happen, is presented not as something cold or mechanical, but as something that exists with weight and interiority. He doesn't enjoy what he does, he just does it, because that's what he is. What makes the cosmic owl interesting in the context of the show's hidden layer is that he's part of a whole theological system that Ooo has developed over its 1,000-year existence, a religion built on figures who are genuinely real and genuinely powerful. Grob, Gob, Glob. Grod, the four-faced deity worshipped in some parts of Ooo, is real. He shows up in Sons of Mars and is voiced in that appearance by Tom Kenny, doing 4 different voices. Party God is real, death is real, and he's a rock and roll skeleton who arm wrestles for souls. The show's gods are all actually there. In the immediate aftermath of the Mushroom War, whatever religious traditions survived were presumably dismantled or fragmented, but 1,000 years later, Ooo has rebuilt its theology entirely from scratch, based on the actual supernatural entities its residents can see and interact with. That's a fascinating thing when you sit with it. Ooo doesn't have faith-based religion in the traditional sense. It has observation-based religion, because the things Ooo worships can literally be encountered. Finn and Jake have met death. They've talked to him. He challenged them to a music battle in Death in Bloom. Season 2, Episode 18, aired February 7th, 2011. The existential questions that our world's religions try to answer through metaphor and faith are answered in Ooo through direct experience. Death is real. The cosmic owl is real. Prismo exists outside time and grants wishes. What does belief look like when the things you be believing in are demonstrably, provably there? The show suggests the answer is something complicated, because knowing that death is real doesn't automatically give your life more meaning. Knowing that the cosmic owl validates prophecies doesn't make accepting your death easier. The supernatural facts of Ooo don't resolve the existential problems of its inhabitants. They just give those problems a different texture, a Okay, I want to spend some time with the Treefort neighbours and the background population of the grasslands, because they represent a whole layer of the show's world building that even dedicated fans sometimes gloss over. Tree Trunks is an elderly elephant who lives near Finn and Jake and bakes apple pies. She's sweet, she's gentle, she's also been married multiple times, has a complicated romantic history that the show parcels out across episodes, and her season 1 appearance, Tree Trunks, ends with her biting into a crystal gem apple and exploding into another dimension. The show plays this as a cliffhanger, and then the next time Tree Trunks appears, she's back with no real explanation. She then eventually ends up as the Crystal Queen in that dimension, ruling over it with a mad gleam in her eye, until Finn and Jake remove the apple from her and restore her personality. This whole arc plays out across multiple seasons and is treated with absolute casual normalcy by everyone involved. Tree Trunks marries a character named Mr. Pig, and they adopt a child together. That child is Sweet Pea, also known as the Lich, who, after a long and cosmically complicated chain of events, ends up reborn as a giant sweet baby elephant boy and is adopted by Tree Trunks and Mr. Pig. They name him Sweet Pea. He goes to school, he has nightmares about the darkness inside him, and sometimes the Lich comes briefly to the surface and everyone who encounters it is absolutely terrified. And then Sweet Pea's parents take him home for dinner. This is one of those Adventure Time choices that should not work, and absolutely does. The most terrifying villain in the show, an entity older than the universe, dedicated to the extinction of all life, is living as a goofy baby with good parents in the grasslands, and his journey toward being genuinely okay is treated with the same tenderness the show brings to everything. The darkness doesn't go away, but it doesn't have to define you. The grasslands themselves, the area around the Treefort, contain a lot more than the show ever fully maps. Choose Goose is there, a rhyming merchant. Goose, who sells magical items with no ethical framework for what he's willing to sell. He'll sell you anything. He sold Finn a sword that was also a crying baby. He's been there since season 1, and he is never not somehow sinister, despite presenting as whimsical. The Choose Goose energy, pleasant on the surface, deeply wrong underneath, is kind of the grasslands in miniature. Starchy is there, an elderly candy person who in various episodes has held the positions of mailman, community leader, and general background presence. He's been around since the beginning. The fact that the candy people have individual personalities, life histories, occupations, and community roles that exist entirely outside of whatever plot Finn and Jake are involved in is one of the things the show does best. Ooh keeps happening when the camera isn't on it. I've been thinking about this a lot while putting this together. The show's commitment to suggesting that its world is continuous and complete, beyond the edges of the frame. Most adventure shows have a world that exists to provide context for the hero's journey. Adventure Time has a world that has its own ongoing existence, and the heroes are just a part of it you happen to be following. When Finn and Jake aren't around, things keep happening. The Candy Kingdom has its political crises and its cultural events and its citizens with their whole lives. The Grasslands has its history. The Ice Kingdom has whatever's going on with Gunter at any given moment. Gunter deserves more attention than they usually get. Gunter is the most significant of the Ice King's many penguins, the one who is consistently his most present companion, the one whose name the Ice King assigns to all of his penguins because the crown of Urgent's Evergreen has imprinted that name deeply into the Ice King's psychology. We've talked about this in another video, but what I want to focus on here is the specific detail that in the series finale, after Simon Petrikov is freed from the crown's influence and is himself again, Gunter picks up the crown and puts it on. Gunter's deepest wish is to be like the Ice King, to be the powerful, commanding figure that Gunter has lived with and looked up to their entire life. The crown imprints this wish and transforms Gunter into Ice Thing, a new version of the ice. King concept, cheerful and somewhat different in energy from the original. Wearing the same crown, the cycle continues. The crown that was made 65 million years ago to solve a problem that was already solved keeps expressing its programming. It keeps turning whoever wears it into a version of the person who made it. And Gunter, who just wanted to be like the one they loved, gets swallowed by that machinery. The wiki documents the Ice Thing's appearance in the finale. He's the new Ice King figure, visible in the far future sequences, and the fandom's reaction to this detail was divided. Some saw it as sweet, Gunter gets to be powerful. Some saw it as tragic, Gunter gets absorbed into the same curse. I think both readings are correct, and I think the show intends that ambiguity. Let me tell you about the Nightosphere, because I think it's one of the most underexplored locations in Ooo's cosmological geography. The Nightosphere is the demon dimension ruled by Hunson Abadir, Marceline's father. Its introduction comes in the Season 2 premiere. It came from the Nightosphere, aired July 12th, 2010, when Finn inadvertently summons Hunson by using a summoning ritual from his journal. The Nightosphere itself is described as a purgatory-adjacent dimension where souls go, and Hunson's function is to be its administrator. He collects souls, and he's very committed to this work in an almost bureaucratic way. What's interesting about the Nightosphere as a piece of world building is how Adventure Time treats the demonic. Hunson is technically the lord of all evil, and also kind of a dad who ate his kids' fries one time. His evil is presented as almost departmental, like being an evil cosmic entity is just his job. And at home, he's just a parent who doesn't fully understand his daughter and wishes they were closer. The Adventure Time Encyclopedia, written by Martin Olsen, who voices Hunson and who is Olivia Olsen's actual father, presents Hunson's inner life with this knowing, self-aware darkness that suggests the father-daughter dynamic being played in the show was rooted in something real and specific. Olivia and Martin Olsen playing Marceline and Hunson in a story about a child who feels unseen by her parent, while being an actual child performing this story with her actual parent. That's one of those production details that makes you sit back and just go, okay, wow. The Nightosphere connects to the show's broader cosmological architecture in specific ways. German is said to be the preferred language of demons in the encyclopedia, which, as I mentioned, connects to Princess Bubblegum's use of German in the show. The relationship between the Candy Kingdom and the demonic dimension is never made explicit, but the cultural overlap is there, sewn into the language use, waiting for you to notice it. There's also the matter of the Nightosphere, which is slightly different from the Nightosphere in the show's lore, and the various demon-adjacent entities that float through the margins of Ooo without ever getting fully explained. Hunson's amulet, the Nightosphere amulet, warps whoever wears it towards soul absorption and destruction. It's what makes Hunson what he is when he has it on. Without it, he's manageable, even somewhat reasonable. This creates an interesting parallel with the Ice Crown. Both the Ice Crown and the Nightosphere amulet are artifacts that transform their wearers into something they wouldn't otherwise be. The show's artifacts are all, in some sense, personality replacement devices. They find what's broken in you and amplify it, or they find what's missing and supply a corrupted version of it. I want to come back to the geography for a moment, specifically the place names that appear on the official maps, but never in the show itself. The Sea of Sure Death is real. It appears on the map off the southwest coast of Ooo, near the Lost Cliffs, with a dragon marks in the water. There's a Chicken Blood Cove just south of the Isle of Steam, next to the Fire Kingdom. The Squid Ink Sea is to the southeast, with several unidentified islands and a whirlpool of sharks. The floating gems are literal giant gemstones floating in the ocean off the eastern coast. These names are so specific that they feel less like arbitrary cartography and more like evidence of history. Someone named these places. Something happened at the Sea of Sure Death to give it that name. The Chicken Blood Cove exists for a reason that would presumably be disgusting. The whirlpool of sharks is self-explanatory, but raises the question of what specifically it's used for, or what happened there, or why it's significant enough to be on the map. This is the thing about the official maps as a piece of the show's world building. They're full of information that the show will never give you. They imply a history of exploration, an encounter, and naming that predates anything the show depicts. Whoever mapped Ooo had been out there, had been to the Sea of Sure Death, and survived it, apparently, since they came back to put it on the map. The world of Ooo is genuinely enormous and largely unmapped in the narrative sense. And the glimpses you get through the official geography suggest a world that's been shaped by forces and events and people the show never introduces you to. This is Adventure Time, being generous with its world building in a specific way. It gives you enough to know that what you're seeing is the small part of something much larger. And that gesture of scale, the suggestion that beyond the frame there's always more, is part of what makes Ooo feel real. Okay, I want to talk about the Enchiridion, which is the most important object in the show, that the show treats as basically a MacGuffin for the first several seasons before revealing its cosmological weight. The Enchiridion is introduced in the first season as a sacred book for heroes, the Hero's Handbook, as it's described, which contains the accumulated wisdom and laws of heroism. Finn and Jake obtain it in the 5th episode of the series, The Enchiridion, which aired April 19th, 2010. It's a good season 1 adventure, a quest to find the book on top of a mountain, a series of trials that test Finn's heroism, a reveal at the end that the most important test was the last one. Standard hero quest stuff. And then the Enchiridion sort of fades into the background for seasons. It sits in the tree fort. It gets mentioned occasionally, and then in the season 5 premiere, Finn the human and Jake the dog, aired November 12th, 2012. It turns out that the Enchiridion is a key. Literally, it can be converted into a key capable of unlocking dimensional portals. The portal it unlocks, specifically, is the time room, Prismo's domain, the most stable point in the multiverse. The book that was supposed to be a manual for heroes turns out to be a cosmic device for accessing the fundamental machinery of reality. The show doesn't make a big deal about the gap between what the Enchiridion appears to be and what it turns out to be. It just extends the meaning of an object we've known for 4 seasons. This is Adventure Time's approach to almost all of its most important revelations. The thing you've been treating as a background detail was always more significant than it looked. The Enchiridion was always a multiversal key. The snail was always a vessel for the Lich. The Ice King was always Simon. The show doesn't rewrite its history, it completes it. The Distant Lands special for BMO, which I've mentioned a few times, contains a detail in the title card design that the fandom picked up almost immediately. When BMO is launched to space in the opening of that special, the rocket launching him comes from MO Company, the same Badlands factory we visited in B-More. The implications of this, that Mo had been planning for space colonisation, that his blueprints for Martian domes were real intentions rather than fantasy, seeds a whole additional layer of Mo's history without ever stating it directly. Mo wasn't just building robots, he was building infrastructure for a civilization he hoped would eventually reach the stars. And then the Mushroom War happened, and 1,000 years later his robots are still there in the Badlands, and BMO is the last one who remembers what the project was for. Think about that for a second. BMO was made to take care of a child, to find a family, to be a companion in a world Mo helped shape, and the most distant legacy of Mo's dreams, a rocket, blueprints for Mars, the technological ambitions of the pre-war world. All of that lives on in a little game console who sings songs about their friends being their son. I want to get into the religious and spiritual geography of Ooo in more detail because I think it's one of the most carefully constructed layers of the show's world, and it doesn't get enough attention in analyses that focus on the lore. We know that Grob Gob Globgrod is a worshipped deity in Ooo. The wiki notes that characters in the show swear by this entity regularly. Glob is an expletive with the same energy as taking the Lord's name in vain. When Grob Gob Globgrod actually appears in Sons of Mars, Season 4, Episode 15, aired May 28th, 2012, they're a 4-faced deity on Mars, presiding over a Martian civilization that appears to still be functioning 1,000 years after the Mushroom War. The Martian civilization survived what Earth's civilization didn't. Magic Man, who has been tormenting Finn and Jake across multiple seasons as a chaotic, cruel trickster figure, is revealed in this episode to be a Martian, exiled from Mars for his behaviour. The context for his cruelty is slowly revealed to be grief. He lost someone he loved and it broke him in a specific and irreversible way. But that's a whole separate thread. The point is, the religion of Ooo is observational in the way I mentioned before, and Grob Gob Globgrod is genuinely real, genuinely present, and genuinely accessible to people willing to travel to Mars. The Cosmic Owl operates at the same level. Death and his dog Cuba are real. The existence of these entities creates a theological landscape unlike any other in fiction, one where the objects of worship are subject to the same physics and narrative rules as everything else, where you can argue with death and win a music contest and get your friend's life back. This isn't magic realism, it's something stranger, a world that takes the supernatural at face value and then asks, okay, so now what? What does meaning look like when nothing is metaphorical? What does courage look like when you know exactly what death will feel like? Because you've met death and he's kind of a cool guy. What does faith look like when the things you be believing in are just there? Jake's answer to this across the series is something like Buddhism. In the episode Cloud Hunt, he tells someone he's just eliminating desire from my heart. It helps to pass the time. That is essentially the stated goal of the Eightfold Path, the central pursuit of the Four Noble Truths. Jake, raised by non-magical dogs alongside a magical adopted human brother, found his way to an Eastern philosophical framework for navigating a world where everything is strange and nothing stays. The wiki notes this as a genuine Buddhist reference, not a throwaway line. Jake is, in some quiet way, a practitioner. Shelby the worm, the tiny worm who lives in Jake's viola and occasionally offers commentary, is apparently a priest, or at least a religious functionary. In The Pit, Season 6, Episode 21, Shelby blesses an object, and the blessing works. He can actually imbue things with holiness. The wiki acknowledges this might be a throwaway joke, or might genuinely mean Shelby has religious authority in Ooh. Either way, the worm who lives in Jake's musical instrument apparently has access to the sacred, which feels right for Adventure Time. The whole theological structure of Ooh points back to the Mushroom War in a way that's easy to miss. The pre-war religions, Christianity, clearly, probably others, were dismantled or forgotten along with everything else. What survived 1,000 years later were the things that couldn't be forgotten because they were literally still there. Death is still there. Prismo is still in his time room. The cosmic owl still walks through dreams. The religion of Ooh grew up around what was present, not what was remembered, because memory itself had been nearly erased. Let me talk about the voices briefly, because the show's casting choices contain a layer of hidden meaning that I find genuinely moving. Tom Kenny voices the Ice King. Olivia Olson voices Marceline. In the real world, Tom Kenny has known Olivia Olson since she was a child. Her father is Martin Olson, the voice of Hunts and Abadir, and Kenny and Martin Olson are longtime friends and collaborators. So, when Tom Kenny voices an older man who lost himself trying to protect a young girl, and Olivia Olson voices that young girl who became a 1,000-year-old woman, still mourning what happened to him, they're doing this while drawing on an actual long-term relationship between an older man and a younger woman who grew up around him. The acting is informed by something real, even if neither of them is acknowledging it directly. That's the kind of casting detail that the show's creators were aware of, and the show was built around. It's not hidden in the traditional sense. It's publicly documented in interviews, but it's the kind of thing that, once you know it, makes every I Remember You scene slightly unbearable in a new way. The episode I Remember You, which aired October 15th, 2012, was originally titled Help. Producers and writers have talked about this. The episode is known to be partially an allegory for Alzheimer's disease, for the experience of watching someone you love lose themselves piece by piece, for the specific kind of grief of a person still being physically present, while the person who inhabited that body becomes inaccessible. The original title, Help, carries the desperation of that. The word you'd say if you were Simon writing those notes, the word you'd say if you were Marceline trying to reach him. The Skid Row song, I Remember You, is where the final title came from. But Help is still what the episode is about. I'm going to take a second with the Cosmic Owl again, because I want to get into something the show plants in Hoots that I've never seen discussed fully. In that episode, Season 7, Episode 15, which aired January 8th, 2016, the Cosmic Owl has a dream about Princess Bubblegum, and it's implied that he develops feelings for her. The whole episode is told from the Cosmic Owl's perspective, which is unusual for the show, and it reveals that he exists in a kind of isolation. He's the entity who delivers Croak dream prophecies. He knows when people are going to die. He holds that knowledge constantly alone, and the episode suggests that the weight of this has made genuine connection difficult for him. Here's the thing that interests me about that. The Cosmic Owl's isolation is structurally similar to Marceline's. Both are ancient entities who have been present through extraordinary amounts of death and change. Both carry knowledge that separates them from ordinary experience. Both have, in some sense, been unable to connect fully with the mortal world because they exist at a different scale of time. The difference is that Marceline found people, found Simon, found Bubblegum, found the friends she surrounds herself with, while the Cosmic Owl is, as of Hoots, still searching. He's the show's version of what Marceline might have become if she'd never had anyone, which is to say, still functional, still present, still doing the job, but very alone. The show is full of these structural rhymes, characters whose stories mirror each other across different registers, different timescales, different apparent genres. Simon and Mo are both ancient humans who survived by replacing themselves. Simon losing his personality to a crown, Mo losing his body to machines. Bubblegum and Lemongrab are both creators who struggle with the consequences of what they've made. Finn and Fern are both iterations of the same essential being, navigating different circumstances. The Land of Ooo is full of echoes. Let me tell you about the title card secrets, because they're one of the most overlooked repositories of hidden information in the entire show. Every Adventure Time episode has a title card, a brief image that appears before the episode begins, usually painted in watercolour style, sometimes by storyboard artists or background painters. And these title cards often contain hidden details, foreshadowing, or references that the episode itself doesn't explain. The title card for I Remember You shows a room with papers, scarves, and scattered items that appear to belong to Betty, Simon's fiancée. This was noted by the Adventure Time wiki. One of Betty's scarves is visible among the items. I Remember You aired October the 15th, 2012. Betty, the episode that introduces Betty as a character who time travels to the present, didn't air until February 24th, 2014. The title card for I Remember You was foreshadowing Betty's existence more than a year before Betty appeared. The wiki confirms this directly. This episode's title card foreshadows the events of Betty. That's the kind of long-range planning that the show's critics sometimes doubted. The suggestion that Adventure Time was making it up as it went along, some of it was. The show was famously produced via a storyboard-driven process that gave individual writers and artists significant creative latitude, and not every detail was planned from the beginning. But the Betty foreshadowing in the I Remember You title card is not an accident. Someone put that scarf there on purpose, more than a year before the audience would know what it meant. There's also a background detail in I Remember You that the wiki catches. On a piece of paper in the Ice King's The Past room, there is a newspaper clipping showing Simon Petrikov discovering the Enchiridion. This is a reference to the show's first episode, The Enchiridion, which shows Finn and Jake retrieving the book from a mountain. The implication is that Simon Petrikov, as an antiquarian scholar, had been researching the Enchiridion before the Mushroom War. The Ice King doesn't remember this. He's forgotten that he was once a man who studied ancient artifacts, and that one of those artifacts became the most important thing in the world to him, for the worst possible reasons. The newspaper clipping sits in the background of one of the most emotionally devastating episodes the show ever made, and nobody says anything about it. That's exactly how Adventure Time hides its secrets in a frame you're not supposed to be looking at, while something else is breaking your heart. Let me talk about the language of dreams for a moment, because Adventure Time has a whole vocabulary around dreaming that rewards close attention. Premonitory croak dreams involving the cosmic owl are one layer, but the show also has a recurring interest in the way characters' inner lives manifest in the dream space. The episode Puhoi, where Finn falls into a pillow world and lives an entire life there, is the most extreme example, but it's part of a consistent pattern. BMO constructs elaborate inner worlds. When alone, Jake uses dream imagery in his creative process. Marceline's memories operate like dreamscapes that can be physically entered, as we see in Memory of a Memory. Season 3, Episode 3, which aired July 25th, 2011. Memory of a Memory introduces one of the show's most specific magical mechanics, memory as physical space. The episode was storyboarded by Tom Herpich and Ako Castuera, and later reviewer commentary noted that the visual transitions between Marceline's memories were reportedly inspired by Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. This is the kind of cultural influence the show was drawing from, not other children's cartoons, but Michel Gondry films, post-apocalyptic literature, existentialist philosophy. The influences were always there in the production decisions if you went looking. The detail I keep coming back to in Memory of a Memory is the background of the first memory Finn and Jake enter. Burning ruins of a city, a derelict military tank nearby. This is Marceline's earliest accessible memory. The Mushroom War either just happened or is still happening. Marceline is tiny, surrounded by destruction, and the tank and the ruins are so specific. These are real military vehicles, real architectural rubble, the specific visual grammar of nuclear aftermath, that the effect is genuinely jarring in the context of an otherwise warm-toned show about a girl and a stuffed animal. Hambo appears in this episode for the first time, the teddy bear Simon found for her in the ruins of a toy store. The wiki notes that Marceline says, "Hambo is my only friend," and that reviewers have speculated this means Simon had already started to distance himself by this point in her memory, his behaviour becoming unpredictable enough that she'd stopped counting on him. Hambo isn't just a toy. Hambo's the last stable thing she had. And Ash, the deeply awful ex-boyfriend at the centre of Memory of a Memory's plot, had sold Hambo for a cheap wish. That's why Marceline had put herself under a sleep spell, not from sadness, but from rage. Rage so complete that she'd sealed herself away from it rather than let it consume her. The show uses magic as a metaphor for mental states, with a precision that, again, most analyses miss. The sleep spell is dissociation. The memory core is the architecture of trauma, the thing you can't let go of even when you lose everything around it. The vault is avoidance. The croak dream is the intrusive foreknowledge that something will end. Adventure Time's magical mechanics map remarkably cleanly onto how grief and trauma and psychological defense actually work. And I don't think this is accidental. I want to spend the final stretch of this on the show's relationship with hidden time, the way it layers its world across different temporal registers simultaneously. The show exists in a 1,000-year aftermath, but within that aftermath there are shorter cycles. Bubblegum's 800 years of building her kingdom, Marceline's 1,000 years of survival, Simon's slow erasure over the post-war centuries. And then there are the deeper cycles. The 65 million year cycle of catalyst comets, the pre-universe existence of the Lich. And then beyond all of this, there's the far future, the Shermie and Beth era, 1,000 years after Finn and Jake, where BMO sits on a hill and tells their story to a new generation of heroes. What the show is doing with all of this layering is making Ooo feel genuinely ancient. Not ancient in the sense of this place has been here for a while, but ancient in the sense of this place has been the site of things that matter for longer than most stories even imagine. The snail has been there probably since before the Mushroom War. Mo has been there since before the Mushroom War. Marceline has been there since the Mushroom War. The Lich has been there since before Earth existed, and Finn is the current iteration of a force that has been visiting Earth every 1,000 years, for as long as Earth has been here. Every location in Ooo carries this temporal weight. The Ice Kingdom is both Simon's prison and the Urgent's evergreen, imprinted machinery of an ancient crown. The Candy Kingdom is both a cheerful pink civilization and the structure Bubblegum built over the first family she hurt and silenced. The Tree Fort is both Finn and Jake's home, and Shoko's buried body, and the place where 1,000 years of a young human woman's guilt finally rested. You're never in just one time when you're in the Land of Ooo. You're in all of them simultaneously. The show built this with extraordinary patience across 10 seasons in background details and title card foreshadowing and hidden names on maps and snails waving from the corners of frames. Most of what I've told you tonight was never announced. It was never highlighted. It was just there, waiting for the people willing to look. And that's the real secret. Hiding in the Land of Ooo, I think. Not any single detail. Not the Lich or the crown or the missing piece of the planet. The secret is that the show was always doing more than it appeared to be doing. Always. From the very first episode, when a small white snail waved at you from the background, and you thought it was just a cute detail. It was never just a cute detail. Everything in Ooo is doing two things at once. Everything is a surface and a depth. Everything is a friendly face and an ancient story underneath. And the show trusted you. Trusts you, if you're here, to be the kind of person who was looking closely enough to see both. That's what I keep coming back to late at night when I'm watching this for the 10th time and I catch something I haven't caught before. Not the individual details, as cool as they are, the generosity of the gesture. The show was made by people who believed that someone, somewhere, would be watching carefully enough to notice a scarf in a title card a year before the character who owned it appeared, who would be looking closely enough to see blueprints for Mars on an old man's desk in a background window, who would go back and watch every snail wave and feel the difference. If you're still here, you're those people. You've been here for this whole thing and you noticed it all. The next time you watch Adventure Time, whenever you rewatch it late at night, when it's just you and the show in the quiet, pay attention to the corners of the frame. Look at the backgrounds. Read the text that appears on signs and papers and walls. Notice the languages. Notice the artifacts. Notice what's on the shelves. The Land of Ooo is full of secrets, and it's been waiting for you to find them. Thank you for watching this with me tonight. I mean that. This is the kind of video that only makes sense if someone's actually here for all of it. And you were. That matters. If you haven't subscribed to Enchiridion, please do. It genuinely helps us keep going deeper into this world together. And if you can't sleep, well, you know where we'll be. See you in Ooo. There's a moment in Crystals Have Power, Season 2, Episode 17, which aired January 31st, 2011, where Jake mentions, almost offhandedly, that he trained himself not to use his stretchy powers because his father told him a story about power corrupting. That's it. That's the whole aside. It's presented as a quirk of Jake's character history, a piece of his backstory that informs why he's sometimes reluctant to deploy his full abilities. But here's the thing, Jake's father is Joshua, the magical dog detective, and Joshua didn't just raise Jake, he was literally bitten by Warren Ampersand before Jake was born. And that's where Jake's shape-shifting biology comes from. So when Joshua warns his son about the dangers of power, he's warning him about the very power that was installed into Jake by an alien parasite that bit Joshua. He's warning Jake about something he himself is partly responsible for creating the conditions for. That's a parent carrying guilt about what they've passed on to their child and trying to manage it through cautionary stories rather than direct honesty. We learn this. Warren Ampersand, Joshua's bite, the real origin of the shapeshifting. In Season 8's Jake the Star Child. We've known about Joshua's warning since Season 2. The show planted a hint about a character's psychology in Season 2 and paid it off 6 seasons later. And the payoff entirely recontextualises the original detail. That's the patience of the show's writing at its best. The episode Joshua and Margaret Investigations, Season 6, Episode 18, aired October 2nd, 2014, gives us the full picture of Jake's birth and the circumstances around it. Joshua is a hard-boiled detective dog who is investigating a case with his partner and wife Margaret, and the case involves this alien parasite that bites him. The episode is done entirely as a flashback in a noir adjacent style, which is one of the show's fun habits of genre shifting, and at the end of it, baby Jake emerges from a bump on Joshua's head. His shape-shifting abilities already expressed, already strange. Joshua and Margaret accepting this with complete love and no apparent alarm. There's something deeply moving about Joshua and Margaret as characters, precisely because they're not the focus of any major arc, and yet the show takes care to show that they were genuinely good parents. Finn was adopted into a home that already had magical weirdness in it. Jake's alien-influenced biology, the detective work, all of it, and he was raised with love. The tree fort, Finn's chosen home as an adult, is an expression of this. He chose to stay close to where he grew up, to build a life in the grasslands, to maintain continuity with the family that took him in. He's not running from his past, he's rooted in it. I realise I haven't talked about the Badlands yet as a geographic location, and I should, because the Badlands is one of those areas that the show visits periodically, and that has an accumulated weight across the series that isn't always acknowledged. The Badlands are the dangerous, desolate region of Ooo that contains, among other things, the MO factory. It's where Mo built his robots. It's where BMO came from. But it's also where, in earlier episodes, various threatening creatures and environments are depicted. It has the quality of a frontier zone, a place that isn't controlled by any of the main kingdoms, and therefore operates outside the social structures of Ooo. Things survive in the Badlands because they are tough enough to. In The New Frontier, the Croak Dream episode, Jake's vision of his death involves a journey that passes through terrain consistent with the Badlands. The show connects Jake's mortality to the most dangerous geography of Ooo in a way that's subtle but consistent. The Badlands is where things that can't fit anywhere else end up. Mo survived there for 1,000 years. Jake's death prophecy points there. And then there's the grasslands, which is where everything starts and ends. The tree fort is in the grasslands. Sweet Pea lives in the grasslands. Tree Trunks is there. Chew's Goose is there. It's the heart of Ooo in terms of narrative weight, even if it's not the most politically significant location. The grasslands represent something that the show values deeply, the ordinary, the day-to-day. The fact that Finn and Jake don't live in a palace or a kingdom, but in a tree in a meadow is a constant statement about what matters. Speaking of palaces, the Candy Kingdom. Let's go deeper into it than I've gone in other videos, because there are spatial and architectural details that hide some of the kingdom's most disturbing history. The Candy Kingdom is pink and sweet and full of cheerful candy people, and also underneath it all there's a giant biomass of living bubblegum. The Mother Gum, the vast, ancient, barely conscious entity that produced Princess Bubblegum, and her brother Neddy sits beneath the kingdom, pulsing. Neddy is down there with her, sucking on a tree root, traumatised, safe. The visual architecture of the Candy Kingdom, all those rounded pink towers and sweet confectionery buildings, is built literally on top of the living body that produced it. The kingdom is both Bubblegum's creation and the location of her origin. She built it over the place she came from. The Mother Gum is still there, under everything, alive and present, and not going anywhere. There's something about this detail that's simultaneously sweet and deeply unsettling. Bubblegum built her civilization directly over the source of her own existence. She's never very far from what she is and where she came from, even as she's constructed this elaborate, artificial world above it. When things in the Candy Kingdom break down or go wrong, the proximity to the mother gum becomes relevant because the mother gum is alive, and alive things can interact with the kingdom, built on top of them in unexpected ways. The show gives you this detail in Bonnie and Neddy, Season 7, Episode 1, which aired November 2nd, 2015, and then mostly lets it sit in the background of subsequent episodes. You know it's there, you know Neddy is there. Every subsequent Candy Kingdom episode is slightly inflected by this knowledge. Let me talk about the Flame Kingdom, because I've been circling it and it has layers. The Flame Kingdom is ruled by the Flame King for much of the series, and it's an absolute monarchy. Flame Princess, Finn's love interest for a major arc of the show, is the Flame King's daughter, and she's been imprisoned for most of her life in a lantern, locked away because her father and a fortune teller told him that she would eventually destroy the Flame Kingdom. She's a solar flare of emotion, literally. When she's in a state of heightened feeling, she burns things, and her father's response was to contain her. The specific cruelty of this setup is something the show addresses directly. Flame Princess was imprisoned not because of what she'd done, but because of what she might do. She was contained on the basis of a prophecy about her potential, and that containment, that isolation, that being treated as a threat before she'd been given the chance to be anything else, this shaped her in specific ways. She's volatile, not because she's inherently unstable, but because no one ever taught her how to manage her power, because everyone who should have was too afraid of what that power might become. The arc where Finn and Flame Princess fall for each other, and the arc where it ends, which involves Finn manipulating her dream state to engineer a conflict between her and Ice King, for reasons that were ostensibly about preserving her good character, but were actually about Finn's own complicated feelings, is one of the more honestly uncomfortable portrayals of a teenage romantic failure in children's television. Finn does something wrong. He does it with something like good intentions, but those intentions don't make it okay, and the show doesn't let him off the hook. Flame Princess ends their relationship clearly and with justification, and Finn has to sit with what he did. That episode, Frost and Fire, Season 5, Episode 25, which aired March 25th, 2013, is one of those that the show deploys to resist the usual heroic narrative exemptions. Finn is not exempt from the consequences of bad behaviour just because he's the hero. Ooh is not a world where protagonists get automatic forgiveness. The show is making a sustained argument about accountability throughout its middle seasons, and Flame Princess's arc is a central part of it. Flame Princess eventually overthrows her father and becomes ruler of the Flame Kingdom herself, which is a satisfying arc resolution. The imprisoned daughter becoming the legitimate ruler of the thing that imprisoned her, and the show's finale gives her a brief glimpse of a good future. She's leading her people. She's stable and confident and herself, but the hidden detail in all of this is the Flame Kingdom's geography. It exists as an active volcanic region that's effectively a separate ecosystem from the rest of Ooo. High temperatures, fire-based biology, and architecture made of flame-resistant materials. The show never fully explains how the Flame Kingdom was founded or who preceded the Flame King as its ruler. The colour map of Ooo labels it Burning Lands rather than Flame Kingdom. The version used in production shows the kingdom with its more formal name, but the original pitch map had a different nomenclature, suggesting the kingdom existed in a different form or under different governance during the early post-war period. There's a whole pre-Flame King history of the Flame Kingdom that the show gestures at without exploring. The fire giants that appear in various episodes, and that Mo's memory sequence suggests he was involved in constructing. Those giants exist somewhere in the fire ecology of Ooo, either in the Flame Kingdom proper or in the volcanic regions adjacent to it. Mo's blueprints for the fire giants, glimpsed in a single background window in The More You Mow, The More You Know, imply that the fire-based infrastructure of Oo's southern region has a human engineering origin, which would place its construction before the Mushroom War, so the Flame Kingdom in its deepest layer might be built on technology that Mo created. The robots in the Badlands, the fire infrastructure to the south, the dome cities planned for Mars. Mo's fingerprints are all over Oo's built environment in ways that the show almost never discusses. He's the silent architect of the world, the one who designed its mechanical skeleton before the war took everything down. Let me tell you about the Lich's first body, because the show is somewhat elliptical about this, and it's worth being specific. The Lich, as we know him in the main series, the skeletal, crowned, green flame-eyed figure, is a body he formed from whoever or whatever was at ground zero of the mushroom bomb. The exact details are left intentionally vague, but the bomb went off and the lich's essence found a host in the mutagenic cascade, and the result was the decaying physical form we see in the show. This form was eventually sealed in amber inside the Candy Kingdom by the hero Billy, who is within the show's mythology the greatest hero who ever lived, the equivalent of Achilles or Hercules, and the amber prison remained intact for an unspecified number of centuries until the possessed snail released the lich in mortal folly. Billy himself is one of the show's most important hidden figures. He's the legendary hero who predates Finn, whose deeds are told in songs and stories, whose cave contains a tapestry of his greatest accomplishments. He's introduced in His Hero, Season 2, Episode 5, which aired November 1st, 2010, as someone Finn and Jake idolise. And then the show, seasons later, reveals that Billy was possessed by the lich and used as a vehicle to manipulate Finn into gathering the gems of power for the Enchiridion key. The thing about the Billy reveal, that the legendary hero had been the lich's puppet, is what it does to the mythology of Ooo retrospectively. Billy was the greatest hero. He defeated the lich and sealed him away. And then eventually, the lich found a way back into Billy's body and used the hero's trusted form to accelerate its own agenda. The greatness of the hero becomes a vulnerability. The most powerful weapon in Oo's defensive mythology gets turned against it from the inside. This is the lich's specific genius as a villain. He doesn't fight heroes directly when he can use them. He possessed the snail. He possessed Billy. He used Finn's trust in Billy against him. He's patient. He's strategic. He has the patience of something that existed before the universe and expects to outlast it. His timeline isn't the show's timeline. His timeline is everything. Let me get into the role of music in the hidden layer of Oo's culture, because it's another area that rewards close attention. Adventure Time is a musical show in a way that goes beyond just having songs. Characters are defined by what instruments they play and how they play them. Marceline's axe bass, made from her family's battle axe, tells you that she came from somewhere violent and transformed that violence into art. Princess Bubblegum plays piano and keyboards, and the viola in the What Was Missing episode. And these instruments map to her personality: classical, precise, structured. The Ice King plays drums and the omnichord, which are both somewhat chaotic rhythm-based instruments, appropriate for a character whose personality has been replaced by something else's programming. Jake plays the viola. This is well documented. He's actually good. In multiple episodes, his viola playing has genuine musical character. He improvises. He plays emotionally. He uses the instrument as an expression of who he is in a given moment. The viola is an underdog instrument. It's the middle child of the string family, not as prominent as the violin, not as deep as the cello, often overlooked. Jake, as a viola player, is perfect. He's not trying to be the loudest or the most impressive. He just plays and it's good. BMO plays multiple instruments depending on the episode, but is consistently associated with synthesizers and electronic music, the sounds of the pre-war world, preserved and replayed by a machine that was built before the Mushroom War and has been carrying those sounds ever since. The electronic tones in Adventure Time's score, the work of Casey James, Basikis and Tim Kiefer, were designed to feel simultaneously modern and nostalgic, which is exactly right for a post-apocalyptic world where the technology that survived is both ancient and functional. The music of Ooo is the music of survivors. It's what's left after everything that was being performed before the war was lost or forgotten. Marceline plays the blues, because the blues are a survivor's music. They're about keeping yourself going through the worst of things by finding a sound that holds your pain without drowning in it. Jake plays the viola because it's the instrument that nobody notices until suddenly you realise it was carrying the whole piece. BMO plays electronic music because it literally carries the memory of the machines that made it, and the music it produces is those machines remembering. The whole culture of music in Ooo points back, like everything else, to what was lost and what survived. The show's title cards are painted in a specific watercolour style that I want to mention as a piece of visual world building because they represent the show's visual identity in miniature. They were produced by individual artists on the team, background painters, storyboard artists, and they're consistently beautiful in a way that operates somewhat separately from the show's main animation style. The title card for I Remember You, which I mentioned earlier, shows the room with Betty's scarf. The title card for Holly Jolly Secrets Part 1 has Christmas iconography, painted in a style that seems slightly off, slightly wrong, which captures the episode's whole conceit, a world that has access to Christmas symbols without knowing what they mean. The title card for Simon and Marcy. It shows Simon and young Marceline walking through the ruins of a city, the image painted in muted colours, with bare trees and destroyed buildings visible through the fog. It's a portrait of the whole episode, two people walking through the aftermath of everything. And it's also just a genuinely beautiful piece of art. The people who made this show made it with care, and the title cards are where that care is most visible. Now let me talk about something that doesn't get enough attention: the secret history of the magic users of Ooo. The show has several institutions for magic. Users, Magic Betty, Wizard City, the general population of Ooo who interact with magic as a daily utility rather than a special power. Magic in Ooo is post-apocalyptic technology, essentially. It emerged in the aftermath of the Mushroom War and the mutagenic cascade, and it provides a lot of the same functions that our world's technology provides: transportation, communication, manufacturing, entertainment. The episode Wizards Only Fools, Season 5, Episode 33, aired September 16th, 2013, reveals that Princess Bubblegum specifically dislikes magic, preferring science, and that she believes magic is just science that hasn't been explained yet. This is one of the show's most explicit philosophical statements, delivered through a bubblegum argument about epistemology, and it sets up a tension that runs through the rest of the series, the conflict between magical and scientific worldviews. In a world where both are demonstrably functional, Bubblegum's preference for science over magic is an expression of her character in a way that connects to everything else we know about her. She wants things to be explainable. She wants causation to be traceable. Magic, by definition, resists this. It operates on rules she doesn't always have access to or understand. And for someone who has spent 800 years maintaining careful control over her kingdom, through precise knowledge and management, the existence of forces she can't fully analyse is threatening in a specific way. There's a hidden tension in the show's treatment of magic that I find fascinating. The things that are most important: Simon's transformation, Marceline's vampirism, the Lich's possession of the snail, Jake's shape-shifting, the catalyst comets, are all magical, and they're all somewhat resistant to Bubblegum's scientific framework. The deepest truths of Ooo operate according to rules that science can observe but can't fully explain. Even Bubblegum, with her extraordinary intelligence and her centuries of research, can't fully demystify the ice crown or the nightosphere or the nature of the cosmic owl. The show is making a point here that I think is worth naming directly. Explanation and understanding are not the same thing. You can document the effects of the ice crown and trace its history back to Urgent's Evergreen and understand its mechanisms in full detail, and it still won't give you back Simon. Understanding what something is doesn't resolve the grief of what it's done. That's a truth that Bubblegum knows, but hasn't fully accepted when the show starts. By the end of the series, by the time she's standing in the ruins of a battle against Golb, having just watched Marceline do something completely outside the parameters of science to help end the fight, she's gotten closer to it. She still prefers science, she always will, but she's learned to make room for the things that don't fully submit to it. The Magic Users organisation, sometimes called the Wizard Community, has its own politics and hierarchies that the show glimpses in episodes like Wizard Battle and Wizards Only Fools. There are classes of magic user, there are disputes over magical resources and recognition. There are the kinds of bureaucratic and social dynamics that any community of competitive specialists develops. The Wizard City of the later seasons, developed more fully in the Wizard City Distant Lands special, has its own school, its own culture, its own tensions. It's a corner of Ooo that exists fully independent of whatever Finn and Jake are doing. The Distant Lands specials are worth mentioning in the context of hidden details because they extend the world in directions the main series couldn't reach. Wizard City, in particular, follows Peppermint Butler, Princess Bubblegum's deeply sinister yet loyal aide as a student in a magic school, and it reveals layers of his background that the main series only hinted at. Peppermint Butler have always been coded as having dark knowledge. He's done deals with death, he's performed rituals, he has a room full of dark magic artifacts, and Wizard City finally explores where that knowledge comes from and what it cost him. These extensions of the world feel continuous with the main series, precisely because the world was always big enough to contain them. The show was never so tightly focused on Finn and Jake that the supporting cast felt like decoration. They were always people with their own histories, their own secrets, their own threads waiting to be pulled. Let me come back to the hidden layer of the show's title cards one more time, because I want to mention a specific one. The title card for The Lich, Season 4 finale that aired October 22nd, 2012. It shows a hand, the Lich's hand, emerging from the darkness, fingers extended. There's nothing else in the frame. No context, no other characters, just the hand and the dark. The Lich's Season 4 appearance involves him possessing Billy and using that form to manipulate Finn. The title card for the episode tells you something about this before you even start watching. It shows you the Lich reaching out of darkness in a form that looks like it might be a human hand. It's not quite right. The proportions are slightly off, the angle is slightly wrong. But in a thumbnail or a title card, you might not immediately register that this isn't just a dramatic image of a hand. It's the Lich reaching out. It's the thing hiding inside, the thing you thought you could trust. The details are always in the frame. They're always there if you're looking. One last thing before we close, because I've been sitting with this for a while, and I want to say it directly. The reason all of these hidden details matter, the snail, the maps, Moe's blueprints, the languages, the title card scarves, the newspaper clipping about the Enchiridion in Ice King's past room. The reason they matter isn't just because they're clever, it's because they're evidence of love. The people who made Adventure Time were genuinely in love with the world they were building, not in a precious, protective way, not in a way that prevented them from doing dark things to it or letting it be complicated and painful and morally ambiguous. But in the way you're in love with something, when you spend your time making it more real than it needs to be, when you put a scarf in a background, because the character who owns it deserves a foreshadowing that she'll appear, when you name seas on a map that you'll never visit in the show, when you hide a snail in every episode because you want someone, somewhere, to be looking closely enough to find him. The secret of the Land of Ooo isn't any single piece of information. It's the accumulated effect of all of them together, the sense that you are in a world that was made with specific, patient, generous attention, that the people who built it were thinking about you. The viewer, the late night rewatcher, the person who would someday pause on a frame and notice a date hidden in a background. And they left all of this for you because they believed you'd find it. And here you are. Thanks for spending this time with me in Ooo tonight. You stayed for all of it, and that means everything. Subscribe to Enchiridion if you haven't. Every subscriber helps us keep going deeper. And if you can't sleep, there's more waiting for you right here. We'll see you in the grasslands. Okay, I want to get into something that genuinely doesn't come up enough in discussions of Adventure Time's hidden layer, the architecture of the Ice Kingdom, and what it tells you about who Simon Petrikov actually was. When you watch the early seasons of the show, the Ice Kingdom is presented as a villain's lair. It's cold, it's alien, it's full of penguins, who are all named Gunter, and the Ice King lives at the centre of it, making increasingly unhinged plans to kidnap princesses. Standard antagonist geography. But once you know Simon's story, once you've seen Holly Jolly, Secrets Part 2, and I Remember You, and Simon and Marcy, the Ice Kingdom reads completely differently on a rewatch, because Simon Petrikov was a scholar, an antiquarian. He collected old things, studied them, understood them in their historical and cultural context, and the Ice King, who has no access to Simon's memories but who is an expression of the Crown's imprinted personality, is a hoarder of objects. The Ice Kingdom is absolutely stuffed with things. Junk, treasures, artifacts, accumulated material. The Ice King doesn't know what most of it means or where it came from. He just keeps things. He can't let go of things. That's Simon, expressing itself through someone who doesn't remember being Simon. The scholarly impulse to collect and preserve, stripped of the intellectual framework that gave it meaning, becomes this uncontrolled hoarding behaviour. The part of Simon that cared about old things survived the transformation. It just lost the context that made it legible. The Ice King's room, called the Past, which appears in I Remember You, is where he keeps things from before he was the Ice King. Things that once belonged to Simon, things he doesn't understand but can't discard. Betty's scarf is in there, almost certainly. Simon's research notes, the newspaper clipping about the Enchiridion. The Ice King doesn't know why these things matter. He just knows he can't throw them away. And that instinct, the refusal to let things be lost, is Simon surviving in the only form the Crown allows. I've rewatched the I Remember You episode probably 8 or 9 times across the years I've been doing this channel. And there's a detail that I always notice and that always gets to me. The Ice King's room is chaotic, yes, but it's not dirty. He takes care of his things. He doesn't know what they are, but he maintains them. He dusts, he keeps them out of the weather. Whatever damage the Crown has done to his memory and personality, it hasn't destroyed the care that Simon brought to the objects in his collection. The preservation instinct survived, just the preservation instinct bereft of the knowledge of why. There's a similar pattern with Marceline's cave. The location, the show confirms is in the Red Rock Cliffs area, based on the official map. The cave has been Marceline's home across multiple periods of her 1,000-year life. The show depicts it in different states at different times, bare and stark in the post-war period, personalised and homey in the modern setting. She's been returning to this cave for centuries. The cave is geography as biography. She keeps coming back to the same place because it's the thread of continuity in a life where everything else keeps changing. People die, kingdoms rise and fall, Ooh transforms around her, and the cave in the Red Rock Cliffs stays. It's the one geographical constant in her existence, the anchor point she returns to across hundreds of years of loss. The picture of Mary and Jesus on her wall, confirmed by Natasha Allegri as exactly what it appears to be, is probably there because, it was already there when she first moved in. Something left by whoever lived there before the Mushroom War. Some piece of the old world that she chose not to remove, not because she's necessarily religious, but because it's been there longer than anything else in her environment. And there's a respect in leaving old things in their place. That reading is entirely my own speculation, but it fits with everything else we know about Marceline. She keeps things that connect her to what came before. She kept Hambo for centuries. She kept Simon's notes. She kept the axe base made from her family's battle axe. She keeps the picture of a mother and child from a religion that the rest of the world has mostly forgotten. She's a curator of the lost, just like Simon. And unlike Simon, she has the memory to know what she's curating. Let me talk about the languages again, but from a different angle. The specific significance of Korean in the show. Lady Rainicorn speaks Korean. This is a real language choice with real cultural implications. The rainbow unicorn, who is one of the show's most consistently present supporting characters, who is Jake's partner and the mother of his children, who is warm and funny and present. She speaks Korean, and most of the show's English-speaking audience has never known what she's saying. If you speak Korean, Lady Rainicorn is a completely different character. She makes jokes in Korean that don't come through in the English-speaking version of the show. She has opinions and reactions and observations that are invisible to the majority of viewers. The show made a deliberate choice to include a significant character whose dialogue is inaccessible to most of its target audience, without ever apologising for this or finding a workaround. This is a form of inclusion that's actually radical, rather than just tokenistic. Lady Rainicorn isn't included. Despite speaking Korean, her Korean-speaking identity is part of what she is. The show doesn't translate her, because that would be a kind of erasure. Jake understands Korean, and Princess Bubblegum can follow along, and that's the audience within the show who hears her fully. But the rest of us, here is a character you can see and love, but cannot fully access. What does that tell you about how you usually experience the world? Adventure Time never makes this argument explicitly. It just makes Lady Rainicorn and gives her Korean dialogue and leaves it for you to think about. The show trusts its audience to do the work. Jake and Lady Rainicorn's children, TV, Charlie, Viola, Jake Jr. and Kim Kil-wan, are all rapidly aged up hybrid rainbow dog hybrids who appear in Jake the Dad, Season 5, Episode 6, which aired November 19th, 2012. The episode is a sweet, somewhat chaotic look at Jake's panicked approach to fatherhood, and the children go from newborns to functional adults within a single episode, because that's how Rainicorn biology apparently works. Their rapid development is played for comedy, but it also sets up a situation that the show uses across the remaining seasons. Jake's kids exist as adult-ish characters with their own personalities and lives, and the show dips in and out of them. Kim Kil-wan in particular becomes a recurring figure who represents the practical, business-minded offspring who has a somewhat complicated relationship with his father's freewheeling approach to life. He buys the tree fort at one point. He's a pragmatist in a family of dreamers. Jake's response to having a pragmatist child is to be bewildered and a little hurt, and to eventually find respect for the differences between them. The detail about Jake's kids that connects to the hidden layer of Oo's geography in the far future. Sequences of the finale. A thriving dog city is visible, described as being populated by the descendants of Jake and Lady Rainicorn. The dog wedding in space, shown in Grayble's 1000 plus, set 1,000 years in the show's future, is part of this same lineage. Jake's descendants apparently travelled to space and built there. The man who would rather nap than do almost anything else fathered a civilization that eventually made it to orbit. That's Adventure Time's version of legacy. Unheroic, oblique, achieved mostly through the ordinary business of having children and letting them become whoever they are. Let me talk about the Nitosphere's geography relative to Oo's, because it's another layer of the world that doesn't get mapped very often. The Nightosphere is reached through a portal. In the show, you draw a circle in demon's blood, recite an incantation, and it opens. The portal leads to a dimension that's adjacent to Ooo in some cosmological sense, but physically separate. The Nightosphere has its own interior geography. It's depicted as a vast red landscape with demonic architecture, endless in a way that suggests dimensional rather than physical scale. It's bigger on the inside than any physical space should allow. Hunson's control of the Nightosphere is explicitly administrative. He doesn't just live there, he runs it. The souls he collects are processed in some way that the show never fully explains. And the Nightosphere, as an institution, has been operating for at least as long as Marceline has been alive, which means it predates the Mushroom War. There was a hell before the bombs went off. There was a system for managing the dead before the war created so many more of them. The relationship between the Nightosphere and the other demonic or supernatural dimensions in the show's cosmology, the time room, the crystal dimension, the dead worlds, is never fully mapped. The show has a cosmology, but it's not a complete diagram. It's more like a series of windows opening onto a larger space that you can see into but never fully survey, which again is one of the things that makes Ooo feel real. You're not given the full map because the full map doesn't exist in the show's universe either. Everyone in Ooo knows more about where they are than they know about everywhere else. I want to mention the crystal dimension specifically because Tree Trunks' arc there, from Tree Trunks in season 1 through her eventual return as Crystal Queen, represents one of those character storylines that the show treats as both comedy and something genuinely strange. The crystal dimension is a glittery, jewelled realm that operates on different rules from Ooo. Tree Trunks, upon biting the crystal gem apple in Tree Trunks, Season 1, Episode 4, aired April 12th, 2010, is transported there and apparently, over time, has her personality rewritten by the dimension itself. She becomes the Crystal Queen, still recognisably Tree Trunks in some ways, but amplified and distorted, ruling over the crystal dimension with a possessiveness and intensity that's absent from her normal, gentle character. When Finn and Jake reach the crystal dimension in Season 2 and remove the apple from her, she's restored to herself. The apple was a kind of artifact that was continuously transforming her, the same category as the ice crown, the Nightosphere amulet. These objects that keep doing things to whoever has them, they don't stop working just because you've stopped wanting what they offered. The crystal dimension itself disappears from the show after Tree Trunks returns. It's one of those alternate spaces that the show visits and then essentially seals off. We know it's out there. Dimensional physics suggest it's still accessible in theory, but the narrative doesn't return to it. It becomes part of the background of Oo's cosmological geography, one of the spaces adjacent to the main world that has its own rules and its own weird history. Okay, I want to spend time with something I haven't covered yet, which is the history of the various wars and conflicts that have shaped Oo's current political geography. The Mushroom War is the obvious one, the nuclear apocalypse that ended Earth's civilization and created the conditions for Oo's existence. But within the 1,000 years between the war and the present day of the series, Ooo has had its own conflicts. The show gives you glimpses of these without ever fully narrating them. Billy fought the Lich and imprisoned him. This happened at some point in the distant past, probably several hundred years before the show's present day, given the growth of the Amber Prison inside the Candy Kingdom and the length of Billy's legend. Billy also fought a bear. The tapestry in his cave lists this among his great deeds, a detail that the show presents with complete deadpan seriousness, and that's become something of a fan touchstone for the show's humour. The greatest hero in Oo's history defeated the most powerful evil in Oo's history and also fought a bear. The Candy Kingdom's early history, the Gumball War that's depicted in the show's final seasons as backstory, represents Bubblegum's first major political conflict. She created her family, they betrayed her, she responded with Dum Dum Juice. She founded the Candy Kingdom on top of the conflict's resolution. That's the original sin of the kingdom's founding, and it casts a shadow forward through the whole series, because Gumball and Lolly and Chickle are eventually restored, and the conflict Bubblegum thought she'd resolved turns out to still be there, still unresolved, still requiring real reckoning. There's also a whole series of vampire conflicts that Marceline was involved in. The Stakes miniseries depicts this as the arc where she hunted and absorbed the various vampires of Ooo, becoming the vampire queen in the process. But the show implies that there were vampire-related conflicts that preceded even this, that the vampire population of Ooo was itself a product of the Mushroom War's mutagenic cascade, that vampirism emerged in the post-war period as one of many new forms of supernatural threat that the surviving population had to navigate. The history of conflict in Ooo is, in other words, a history of fighting the consequences of the war that started everything. The Lich was born from the mushroom bomb. The vampires emerged in its aftermath. The elementals' destabilization in the stakes and elements arcs connects to the disruption of natural magical balance that the war created. Even the political conflicts between kingdoms, the various disputes over territory and resources that provide background texture for the show, reflect the fundamental instability of a world that's still, 1,000 years later, recovering from catastrophe. Ooo is a world in permanent recovery. The adventure is what happens during recovery, when the forces of further destruction keep pressing against the edges of what's been rebuilt. There's a detail from the show's opening title sequence that I think is one of the most under-analysed pieces of visual storytelling in the series. You know, the opening, the panning sweep across the land of Ooo, while the main theme plays, Finn and Jake, visible at the end of it. What the panning shot shows you is the Ice Kingdom, various landscapes, the Candy Kingdom, the Tree Fort. It's a tour of the world, but the original draft of the title sequence was completely different. Ward has discussed this in interviews. The rough draft featured the characters just punching random ghosts and monsters, jumping through anything and everything, and there were atomic bombs at the end of it. Ward called this version really silly. Cartoon Network didn't like it and wanted something more graphical, like the Brady Bunch opening. Ward then developed the current version, the slow sweep across Ooo, inspired by the opening sequences of The Simpsons and Pee-wee's Playhouse. The show we got has a different opening than the show that was first imagined. The bombs were always there in the earliest conception of the show's visual identity. They got removed from the title sequence and distributed throughout the background details instead. The bombs are still in the show. They're in the ruins in the background of every post-war scene. They're on the shelf in the tree fort. They're implied in the missing piece of Earth, visible from space. They just got moved from the most visible position to the least visible, which is in retrospect much more effective. The decision to open the show with beautiful slow pan across the world rather than explosions and chaos is a decision about the relationship between violence and setting. The violence is the backstory. The beauty is what grew in its place. The opening sequence says, "This is the world. Everything that made it this way is underneath." That's the exact tonal choice that defines Adventure Time at its best. I want to talk about one more hidden detail before we close, and it's one that I think about specifically in the context of this channel and the show we're exploring. The Enchiridion, the hero's handbook, the object at the centre of the Season 1 quest. The thing Finn and Jake retrieved from the mountain has our channel's name, and the specific thing the Enchiridion represents in the show is something worth sitting with tonight. A book of accumulated wisdom for heroes, a guide to doing the right thing in a complicated world, something ancient enough to have been researched by Simon Petrikov before the Mushroom War, something powerful enough to serve as a key to the multiverse, something that looks like one thing and is ultimately another. The show treats the Enchiridion with respect, not reverence. Adventure Time isn't a reverence show. It's too warm and funny for that. But respect. The object matters. The wisdom in it matters. The fact that it was created to help people navigate a world full of danger and moral complexity, and that this same object can unlock the fundamental structure of reality. That's the show in miniature. The thing that helps you live well in a complicated world, and the thing that has cosmic significance are the same thing. That's what we're trying to do here. Sit with complicated things. Look at them carefully. Find the layer underneath and the layer underneath that. Not because looking is the same as understanding, but because understanding starts with being willing to look. The Land of Ooo rewards looking, so it's built to reward it. Every secret we've talked about tonight, the snail's dark second function, the map's unmapped territories, Mo's hidden blueprints, the scarf in the title card, the newspaper clipping in the background of a devastating scene. All of these were placed there by people who believed someone would look, who trusted the audience to do the work. You did the work tonight. You were here for all of it. The adventure keeps going. The secrets keep revealing themselves to the people who are looking. And I'll be here, going deeper every time you come back. Thank you for spending tonight with me in Ooo. Genuinely. This is the only thing I want to be doing at this hour, and the fact that you're here makes it mean something. Subscribe to Enchiridion if you haven't. Every single one helps us keep making these. And if you can't sleep, well, there's always more world to find in the Land of Ooo. We'll see you next time.